Hello, class. Today we're going to be taking a look at the stalemated 70s. So after the stormy 60s, we then move into the 70s. An interesting turn of events in 1968 leads all of the turmoil and all of the frustration to pick a very pro-establishment candidate in Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon had been the VP under Eisenhower, lost to Kennedy, then went on to be the governor or lose in the governor's race of California. Now comes back to be president, but he comes back to be president under very, very uncertain times. You're going to see, first of all, a stagnation of the economy. You're going to see a lot of Supreme Court seats come open, and he's going to make some interesting nominations there. You're going to see the court do some things in a different way. And then you're going to see some issues with oil overseas and an energy crisis coming up. You also have a lot of attention being paid to damages done to the environment by business. So he's going to be one of the first presidents to really tackle that. Um, of course, the looming issue in the 68 election and afterwards is going to be Vietnam. So, one of the things that Nixon campaigned on was to win the war, that he was going to go out and actually win the war and allow America to walk away with a victory. So, how does he do that? Well, the first thing you're going to see are terms like Vietnamization. You're going to see a lot of specifics here in the chapter and in the text about what that means. But in essence, what it means is he wants the Vietnamese people to take responsibility for the war effort. He wants them to be leading the battles. He wants them to be leading the troops on the ground. He wants to slowly be able to bring America out of the war. One of the interesting issues all along from the beginning of Vietnam, but it intensifies as it goes on, is the alliance with Cambodia by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. So what happens a lot of times is the troops come into Vietnam, they engage us from the north, and then they escape through Cambodia, who we have not declared war with. And so oftentimes our troops, the American troops, just allow them to escape through Cambodia and back up into North Vietnam. Now, one of the issues with all of this is that, again, they're able to retreat and come back and fight another day. So one of the things that Nixon decides to do is start engaging Cambodia directly. And a lot of this is going to be a secret bombing campaign. When the American people find out, they're obviously frustrated. But what's interesting on this is this debate about where does the president's powers of commander in chief end and the Congress's powers of the right to declare war begin, or however you want to say that. You could flip that around, but where do their war powers interact? Where's the line between the two? And so you're going to see a lot of debate go on in this realm as well. And impendingly, we know that eventually Vietnam is going to turn south. A lot of that's going to happen after Nixon's out of office. But again, you're going to see Vietnam continue to be a quagmire through his presidency. There is a fascinating international strategy that occurs during the Nixon presidency. His Secretary of State is named Henry Kissinger, and what he decides to do is to try what they call triangulation, which is America is a Cold War with China and with Russia, but they really believed that Russia was the key enemy. So what if they could play China off of Russia? What if you could break China out of that alliance? And they're able to do so successfully. There's this incredible moment with Nixon meeting Mao in China. But again, what I ask you to do with this question is think through that. So what are the accomplishments there? And what were the limitations? What were they able to get concessions from China? And what was not able to improve? It is a fascinating view, again, just to see him actually in China is just this incredible moment. And then, in 1972, Nixon wins every state but one. He loses D.C. and he loses Massachusetts, but only one state in the District of Columbia, this massive landslide. But during the election, there was a break-in at the Watergate Hotel, which at the time seemed like a small event, unrelated. But as things begin to unravel, you begin to see that those were actually people that had connections with the Nixon re-election campaign, which is one of the most ironic acronyms of all time. They were the Committee to Re-elect the President, so CREEP, C-R-E-E-P. You can't make this stuff up. And, it seems to be a he said, she said. Nixon says he doesn't know. People claim he does know. How can you ever really know the truth? Well, there's one way you can know the truth. If your president happens to be recording all of his conversations, which this just comes to light in a congressional hearing, which is just unbelievable that Nixon, this whole time he's in office, and there's only a few people that knew about it, had an automatic recording system that was recording everything that was said. I mean, it's just incredible. So, of course, Nixon refuses to turn over those tapes, and you would get the Supreme Court involved. There's a lot there in the text of just a fascinating interaction there between Nixon and a special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, and his team. That is will culminate with him being the first president and only president in the United States to ever quit. He resigns. It's clear he was going to be impeached, but just again, make sure that you see that chain of events there that leads to that, but also the political consequences of this and what it's going to do not only to Nixon but his fellow Republicans and the way that they're going to be viewed. So after this, we still have all of these issues. We still have issues in the Middle East. We still have economic issues. We still have civil rights issues. And so we have a VP who becomes president who wasn't even on the ticket. Nixon's VP resigns, so Nixon appoints a VP who then becomes president, Gerald Ford. So no one voted for him. I mean, he was literally the first unelected president in the sense of he wasn't even on the ticket, wasn't even the VP. And so he comes in office and he has to deal with these things. And you're going to then see an election there in 1976 that's going to lead to a Democrat coming in office, President Jimmy Carter, who has got a very different background than all of our other presidents. He really doesn't have a significant background outside of being governor of Georgia. And so it's just a fascinating time in politics where this is where a lot of political scientists go back and talk about a real distrust in government begins in America. Now, not to say that hasn't always been a part of our history, right? If you go back to the American Revolution, there was obviously a distrust of a lot of power in the hands of government. But the Nixon era cover up and deceit and video and audio recordings and it's a time where you really begin to see the American people sour on government moving forward, and it's really unfortunate because of all of the. I mean, it's going to be unfortunate no matter what, but especially during this point in time because of all of the other issues going on in the 60s and 70s when you talk about civil rights, energy issues. In the Middle East is just constant turmoil during this time as well. And so we have that is really when you talk about the 60s and 70s, those are some of the things that I think that you really need to focus in on here as you're going through this time period. I hope that was helpful.